off you go. Hi, everybody again. Welcome to Toronto Enterprise DevOps User Group. I'm sorry, it's been a very long day. I want to say it's been a long year, but it's only January. So the Toronto Enterprise DevOps User Group. Today we are here to talk about the Azure versus GitHub in terms of enterprise readiness. Hope you can see my screen. Before we start, a little bit about myself. My name is Max Yermahanov. I am a Microsoft Azure DevOps MVP. I'm a GitHub Fast Track partner. I work with Object Shop Consulting. I'm a senior consultant there. I have been doing this for a long time. Here's some information, contact information that you can find, my blog, my Twitter, and so on and so forth. If you Google my last name, I'm pretty sure the first page is mine. I'd like to think it's because I'm good, but most likely it's because of the last name is not that common. So if you have any questions after this session, please follow up. You can find, again, the email, the Twitter, anything, let me know what you need. Before we start, let's set up a bit of a baseline. In what context we're going to be talking about the Azure DevOps and the GitHub, and in what context we're not going to be talking about those two tools. So the main questions that we're going to try to answer in this session is, which tool is better fit for my own enterprise right now? Again, both of those tools are excellent tools, right? Both of those tools again, do their job, right? It's the what's important to you, what's important to your team, how is your team working, what is their dynamic, what's their current tool set, and so on and so forth. What are your expectations from the tool that are important to answer when you're choosing the tool? Another thing keep in mind is, again, especially because this is a recorded session, software world is rapidly evolving. So the things that we're going to discuss today in terms of those two tools might no longer be applicable because, again, Azure DevOps evolves really fast. GitHub evolves crazy fast. So the things that might not be available right now, might be available tomorrow. So keep that in mind, right? A bit of a disclaimer. And the most important disclaimer is opinions are my own based on the years of hands-on experience. I love both of those tools. I use both of those tools. So again, what we're going to be talking about this is strictly my opinions, professional opinions. And another thing important to remember is there's a lot of, I want to just get it out of the door right now. There's a lot of talk about the Azure DevOps is going to be deprecated, GitHub will replace it, and so on and so forth, which is, again, maybe that's true, right? We don't know exactly what's going to happen in the future, but right now, what we do know is that Microsoft is committed to supporting and investing in Azure DevOps while it executes its GitHub strategy, while it's investing more into GitHub, while it's making a lot more, again, GitHub more diverse. Any questions? Right? All right. So again, we are evaluating those tools whether they're ready for the enterprise, not for the small developer, open source or whatnot, only for the enterprise. The software world is rapidly evolving, so things that we might say are not available today might be available tomorrow, and opinions are of my own.
Max, I have a question for you
yes,
about GitHub. Azure DevOps. It's the first time I hear that maybe Microsoft strategy is to go beyond GitHub, and maybe Azure DevOps will die a very slow die. Yeah, but is something that we know about, or just rumors, or what information you have, because you have more knowledge about that?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm telling that there's a lot of rumors out there. If you Google things, right? If you go to Stack Overflow, there's a lot of discussions on that topic, right? Ever since Microsoft acquired GitHub, it's been conversations like this, right? Where the Microsoft's gonna again, what was gonna happen because the tools seem to be doing very similar work, right? So I don't know what's gonna happen in the future. Right now, what I do know is that Microsoft is committed to supporting and investing into both tools.
Can I interject a little?
Yes, please.
So I was actually on a PGI call today with Microsoft GitHub talking about, they were just kind of comparing worlds and talking about them. And the interesting thing about Azure DevOps is it's still growing. Like people are adding more and more users to it, especially enterprises, right? So some of their larger customers with enterprises are investing in Azure DevOps a lot. So, that it's not going to go anywhere, not for a long, long, long time. GitHub has, GitHub's very cool. Well, you're going to see Max is going to tell you all kinds of cool stuff about both products. But I don't think it's a case of Microsoft is going to replace GitHub with, or replace Azure DevOps with GitHub anytime soon. It's pretty incredible. I think at the beginning they kind of thought they might, but I think they're as surprised as anybody that is still growing. Well, I'm not particularly surprised. I don't think Max would be either. I mean, it's a great product.
That doesn't answer.
Yeah, I don't think it's going. I don't think it's going anywhere for a long time.
Hopefully, does it answer your question? I'm sorry, I didn't notice.
Yes, totally. Thank you very much.
All right. Again, they're both staying, as far as we know. And given Microsoft history, if they ever decide to deprecate one of those products or go choose a different path, right? They usually give you a lot of heads up. Let's get that out of the door. So in terms of which tool is better for the enterprise, right? When you're selecting for your organization, I wanted to get some quick decisions first, right? Because there's some functionality that you might be interested in that are only available inside that particular product, right? So quick decisions on Azure DevOps. So you need to you should use the Azure DevOps if you require to host data in the different countries other than the United States. At the moment, GitHub.com, whether that's enterprise or just general GitHub.com, it's hosted in the United States only. And while Azure DevOps has the data centers all over the world, right? There's Europe, there's in Germany, India, what else? Canada, US, a number of places, right? So if your data residency is important to you, and it has to be, for example, in Canada, then Azure DevOps is a way to go. Having said that, I'm sure GitHub is working on something to match that functionality of Azure DevOps. Okay, so if you need data to be stored in Canada, for example, or in Europe, and it cannot be in US, Azure DevOps is the way to go.
Sorry, Max.
Yes, please.
Hi, this is Eric Yan. I think
Hi,
we
Eric.
know each
How
other.
are you?
If you okay. Anyway, I question about this particular one, whether they host actually data in Canada. Like, so Azure DevOps, they do have server you can pick that when you create your organization, they can be hosted in Canada.
Yes, you can pick a location and say, I want my Azure DevOps organization to be in Canadian data center. Or Europe,
okay.
or I forgot. There's a number of them, right? That you can pick.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, just to be sure. So I guess
Sure.
it's in the organization setting. You can pick that, right?
You can when you create it, you can pick it. If you created it already and decided later that you want to move it into a different data center, you can create a support ticket that and their support will work with you for free to move it into a different data center.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Okay, because essentially the organization is a collection. If you know TFS or Azure DevOps on server, it's again, it's fairly straightforward to move.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. Beautiful.
Max, one question, like with Azure, we know that they have their data centers, their regions available at different places, as you said.
Yes.
But with GitHub, like when you create an account, you like upload your code over there. Then is it always stored in the United States, or you
Yes.
get some other options with GitHub as well?
At the moment, it's only United States.
Okay.
You don't get an option, right?
That you have listed over here is that in case you want your code, you want to use GitHub, but still you want your code to be residing at a particular place, then you can anybody can make use of GitHub Enterprise Server.
Well, enterprise server, you can host your own server, right? If you have your own host, like on-premise, you can. There's a GitHub enterprise server that you can install on your own machine. That can be in Canada, and then it's yours, and it's in Canada, right? We are only talking about the online solutions, the SaaS solutions. Does that make sense?
And just one more question, like this GitHub Enterprise Server, is it like paid? Is it open source?
GitHub Enterprise Server is almost certainly paid solution. We will get to licensing.
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks,
GitHub.com, the public GitHub.com is free, and it's open source, right? You can get. Well, I'm sorry. There's some. You can get started for free, right? There's also paid solutions that you can pay, but it's the GitHub server itself. It's not free. Okay. So if you need to have a test management solution, if you need to manage test cases, test suites, and so on, then Azure DevOps has a test management service. Like if you go to Azure DevOps, there's a test link, and it's again, you can manage all your tests in there. GitHub doesn't have that. Okay.
And what question, Max? What about GitHub Actions? It's new, but it's kind of a test management solution for GitHub.
I'm sorry. It's the test running solution, right? So I can run the tests, right?
Right.
I cannot manage the test cases. I cannot manage the test suites. I cannot do manual testing using that particular track.
Azure DevOps has Azure test plans for writing test cases. So you have an equivalent of it.
So, right, the test plans in Azure DevOps, not in GitHub. Okay. So another thing that is
but you are absolutely right. You can run automated tests in Actions.
Yes. Just like you can do in Azure pipelines, you can definitely use Actions to actually execute the test. Right, and you can kind of track the test cases using GitHub issues. It's not really the same. It's not really a test management solution, right? In my opinion, right? Okay, so the next point is if you need to have a source control that's other than Git, you can use Azure DevOps. Azure DevOps supports non-Git repositories, main one, TFVC, TFS source control. It's a centralized source control system. You can also integrate Azure DevOps with like SVN and whatnot, right? Hosted SVN. But again, if GitHub is Git only, Azure DevOps has other things, other source control types. Next. And if you require custom dashboards and custom reporting widgets, then Azure DevOps is a way. Azure DevOps is a way to go. Azure DevOps has a built-in as a dedicated sessions for dashboards. You can customize and create as many dashboards as you see fit. You can copy them. You can again make them team specific. You can insert and create all kinds of widgets with all kinds of information in it. In GitHub, you have GitHub Insights. And you do have a very rich API, which you can use to create your own widgets. And widgets and the dashboards, but it doesn't have a built-in tool that, again, I want to have my own dashboard. Okay, you can use third-party tools to, again, build on top of it. All right. And if you want a fully integrated set of developer services for allowing teams to plan work, collaborate on code development, build and deploy applications, Azure DevOps is, in my opinion, the best solution because it has almost it has every service that developer needs to take the code from the idea all the way to planning, all the way through planning, code testing, deployment, and monitoring. So that is the very, very tightly knit services that work very well together, right? GitHub, I put the asterisk in there, is because GitHub also has a lot of those services. It's just not, not as good when it comes to the enterprise world, right? Again, my own opinion, I might not know everything, right? But my own opinion is just, in that terms, Azure DevOps is just a lot more polished solution right now.
Okay, I have a question.
Yes, please.
Yep. You mentioned about planning of work, right? Which is like Azure boards.
Yes.
What's the equivalent in GitHub? Do they have an inbuilt one for planning stuff like Jira's? Or like how it works in GitHub?
Okay, so can you hold your question for like 5 minutes? That's one of my next slides. Is that okay?
Okay.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? All right, moving on. So, and I want to again so those are the things that you need. Again, if you need to any of those functionality, Azure DevOps is a way to go for you. Quick decisions on GitHub. What features are available in GitHub only when you're comparing those two tools, and which will basically drive your decision. You should use GitHub if you want the GitHub Advanced Security. GitHub Advanced Security is amazing. The integration of the GitHub Advanced Security into a developer workflow, it is so nice. It truly allows you to make the shift left for the security, for the code security, a lot more straightforward and a lot easier to actually implement, right? It's excellent. It just works, right? By the way, the GitHub Advanced Security is a feature in GitHub that allows you to scan your code for security vulnerabilities, scan your code for, again, make sure that all of your dependencies are, again, if there's a new version available, it's going to let you know. If it's vulnerable, it's going to let you know. You can even set it up in such a way that it's going to for example, it's going to found the dependency that's out of date and it's vulnerable, but it also found that there's a new version available that has a fix. So it's going to create a pull request for you. And it's going to say, okay, so I updated the version for you. Here's the pull request. Go ahead, review it and approve it, right? So it's very nice. And again, it works beautifully. It also allows you to do things like, it also does things like a secret scanning. So if accidentally committed a secret, a password, a token into your code, it's gonna help you find it. It's gonna help you to undo what you did. Okay, it's gonna say, oh, you created this, or you committed this secret. Let's undo it, right? And it will it's not what it's going to do automatically. It's going to you can set it up in such a way that it can automatically revoke that secret, right? So the token is no longer valid, kind of thing. There's a lot of things that you can configure inside of it. You can also configure your own the pattern for your secrets, how your tokens are generated, what kind of format they're in. So again, it's a very handy feature. So if you need advanced security, GitHub is the way to go because it's not available in Azure DevOps. In Azure DevOps, you can set up our third-party tools like SonarQube, Checkmarks, WhiteSource, Veracode, all kinds of it, right? So you can hook it up. You can also hook them up to GitHub as well, but GitHub already has advanced security. By the way, the one thing why the GitHub security is excellent, it is it hasn't been around for that long. So it doesn't support older languages. or all the versions of the new languages, not always at least. So again, it works great, especially with the new stuff or like slightly old stuff. But if you really need to support something really, really old, then GitHub without security just cannot do that for you right now because, well, it just doesn't know those, right? All right. If you need code spaces.
Is it intelligent enough to, sorry, is it intelligent enough to track the pre-commit changes?
So
Which means, is it intelligent? Yeah. Before you commit your code to your repository, is it intelligent enough to track your code and say, hey, these are your vulnerabilities or these are your secrets, you are not allowed to commit it in your repository?
I haven't seen that scenario. I'm sure it's possible. What I'm using it for is in my pull request as one of the checks, it has to pass that particular scan, and I can customize the rules. I can add my own rules because it's all open source. So it's very advanced, right? Again, I don't know if you can do a pre-commit check or something, but I don't see why not. If you really want to, you probably can, right? I just haven't tried it.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So GitHub Codespaces. If you haven't seen GitHub Codespaces, it's been around for it's been around for a while. It's been recently became publicly available. It basically allows you to set up a development environment, like a Visual Studio Code development environment with all the extensions that you need, the size of the need, and the power that you need inside the web browser. So you don't actually, so for example, right now, when somebody joins the team, development team, right, the new person, it takes them days, weeks, if not months sometimes, to set up their dev environment properly, right? With the code spaces, you can do that with a click of a button. So you can say, and literally the button is a dot. So if you go to GitHub and hit dot, a period on your keyboard, you will see the code spaces, the public version of code spaces opens, right? It's called VS Code Dev. If in the GitHub code spaces also has a commercial version where you can say, I want to define what kind of extensions installed, how does my environment looks for everybody. You can also, by the way, in that environment, you not only can develop, you can actually test things, right? So you can run your test right there. It was going to create, like, you can launch your I don't know, the Angular website, and it's going to give you a URL that you can, it could be private or public, so you can share it and say, okay, here you go, this is what I'm working on right now, go ahead and take a look, right? So it really, again, it's really flexible. I'm probably not giving it justice because I'm just not that good at what's the word, being excited about technology. Sorry,
let me just throw it.
Yes,
it's awesome.
It is. It's really good.
Yeah. It's absolutely amazing.
It cuts down your onboarding to like minutes, and it works consistently. It just makes everything so much easier, right? And the good thing, that means that you can work from anywhere. You can work from your work machine. You can work from your any other machine where you're if inspiration struck, you can connect to iPad and just work from iPad, right? So again, it's very, very powerful. If you need mobile app support, GitHub has mobile app that you can actually use to review a pull request, approve them, and so on and so forth, right? Azure DevOps doesn't. Okay. All right, moving on. So I'm gonna go a little bit quicker. If you have questions, please ask. So before we start, I wanted to just look at the structurally at Azure DevOps, right, and the GitHub, the differences, so that people understand what I'm talking about things down the road. So on the left we have Azure DevOps. On the right we have GitHub. So GitHub, Azure DevOps has structural from the organizational stuff. From the structural standpoint, there's an organization, and then as a team project, and as a repository, which could be either public or private, and as a team, right? So inside that you can create organization. Inside the organization, you can create multiple team projects. Inside team project, you can create multiple repositories, whether that's Git or TFVC. You can make them public and private. You can also block things to say people are not allowed to create public repos because, well, no, because we don't want them to. There's another place for it. And then there's a team, which is, again, you can group people and assign them permissions to things, right? So in GitHub, the structure is slightly different. So it is, you have the enterprise account on top of it, right? So enterprise account, it allows you to group multiple organizations into one collection, or into one bucket, and you can set up your different enterprise policies that will apply to the same organizations, to organizations of your choosing, right? So you can say, you know what, in this enterprise account, we're not allowing public repos. So in that case, none of the organizations will be allowed to create public repos in that particular GitHub. So in GitHub, you don't have a term of the team project that just doesn't, I'm sorry, you don't have a concept of a team project, just doesn't exist. It's all very repo-centric. It's all very developer-centric. In the repository, you can create a private repo, which is available to you only if you have permissions. Internal repo, which is available to you as soon as you authenticate to that particular organization. So it's like a what's the word? It's like an intranet website, intranet analogy kind of thing, right? So I can see it, but again, I don't have to be given permissions to it. I get those permissions by default because I already authenticated. And then there is a public repos. Okay. So in GitHub, also as teams work because there is no team project in GitHub. So the team and again, teams can be teams are basically at the same level as a repository. Another thing I wanted to highlight is in Azure DevOps, native authentication provider is Azure DevOps. You can authenticate to GitHub, to Azure DevOps using your Azure AD, which could be piggybacking on any other Azure that you already configured because you have Office 65, for example, right? You can also authenticate to Azure DevOps using GitHub handles. You can also, because you can configure Azure DevOps to work through configure the federated authentication, which means that you can use any kind of federated authentication solutions to authenticate against almost anything else, right? So Okta or whatnot, right? You can actually support federated authentication. Usually, however, people have been using Azure AD. And then if they need to set up federated authentication, they use ADFS or any other federated solution that they currently have implemented, but they're still on the back end, they still connect to Active Directory. And in GitHub, the native authentication provider is GitHub itself. So it's all GitHub authentication. You also, obviously, it supports Azure AD via SAML authentication. So you can set up, enable SAML in your, you can create an enterprise application in your Azure AD and configure SAML and then use that in your connected to your GitHub. And that way you can connect to GitHub using your Azure AD credentials. And there is EMU, which is enterprise managed users. It's another way to connect Active Directory to a GitHub. The main difference between those two is that when you use SAML, and again, they both use SAML, but anyway, when you use SAML, what's happening is you have a GitHub handle, which is your own GitHub handle, and it's getting linked to your Azure AD account, okay, behind the scenes. So basically, you log into your GitHub, and then you try to access the URL that of a different organization. It's going to say it requires Azure AD authentication. It's going to redirect you to authenticate to Azure AD. You authenticate, and then it's going to link your private GitHub handle, your personal GitHub handle, to that specific corporate ID. So meaning that you have to have both, and you have to know both, right? It works, but what I like more is the enterprise managed users, and the main difference between them is that I don't need to know, or I don't need a GitHub handle. So what enterprise managed users, what's happening is I'm just going, I'm logging into GitHub using the Azure AD authentications directly, and the GitHub handles all the GitHub handle stuff internally, and I don't need to know about it, right? In reality, it is actually creating a GitHub handle behind the scenes. It's very unique, and it cannot be used by anybody else, and it cannot be used in any other organizations either. So it's tied to that specific enterprise account, sorry. But it's, again, it's just behind the scenes. And you don't need to know it. And also, nobody can assign a GitHub handle outside of your organization that way, right? So you have more control with user provisioning. You can also, GitHub has a lot more support and a lot for different apps, and there's a lot of other Octas, and there's a lot of other things that you can hook up into it. In my line of work, it's Active Directory, right? Azure AD most of the time, but it can be hooked to anything else. Any questions? All right, moving on. So Azure DevOps has a very granular access control, which again, it's very granular, so you can do a lot of things, but it also, because there's so many things that you can do, it can be difficult to manage sometimes, okay, which could be confusing. An example, for example, I keep saying the same words twice. The Azure DevOps has the permissions on the repository permissions. It has the pipeline permissions. It has artifact permissions. It has the work item permissions. It has test permissions. It has a lot of things in it, right? So you can actually manage separately. It has the environment permissions, deployment group permissions. So many different elements inside Azure DevOps that you can configure differently, right, at different levels. In GitHub, it's a lot simpler because the permissions are a lot simpler because it's very repo-centric, right? So the permissions that you can say by default, for example, you can configure, you can be either reader, writer, maintainer, or admin, right? So that's it. I'm sorry, triage. I forgot about triage. So they introduced recently more custom permissions that you can create, but it's still very limited, right? For example, I cannot say users are not allowed to run the actions. They only can do source control, or they only can do issues, right? It's just not there. So those are the main things that I want to highlight about Azure DevOps. Now let's go ahead and dig in more into details about every one of those verticals. So Callie, you asked the questions about the Azure boards and GitHub, right? So we're going to talk about it for a second. So Azure boards provide a robust planning capabilities to developers and non-developer roles. So Azure boards is a very mature. Azure boards is a very robust and, again, just solid planning tool out there, right? That's been that's existed for a number of years, and it got improved over the years, right? Right now, it's just great. Okay. GitHub and projects, it says GitHub, it should say GitHub projects and discussions provide developer-centric project planning, meaning that it has GitHub issues, it has pull requests, you can customize those issues somewhat, right? Definitely not to the extent of the Azure DevOps. Having said that, there's a new GitHub issues that are right now in beta. They are very, very good. They're very flexible. And what I love about it, that GitHub issues, is that it basically, the thought process there, I think, was regardless of which planning tool you use, you always end up in Excel, right? So you just always somehow trying to manipulate that data in Excel. So meaning that people love Excel. So what they've done is it mimics the spreadsheet functionality. So you can build your dashboard, your board, your Kanban boards, your backlogs, your views, and so on, right? And the columns very much just like you're doing it in Excel, right? It's very cool, very flexible. If they when they add a little bit more like out of the box templates that saying, oh, here's how it should start with the, for example, if you want to use Scrum, right? Or if you're doing Agile, if you're doing basic stuff, planning, here's how it should start with. You can customize paper from that on, but from that, I'm going to give you a starting point, right? Then it's going to be awesome. It's going to be even better, right? Again, give it a shot. It's a beta right now for everybody. You can just go ahead and give it a shot. So because Azure boards are a lot more mature and a lot more enterprise ready, and again, just they not only thinking about developers right now, they're thinking about all kinds of different roles, right? I give advantage to Azure boards, right? So if I need a planning tool, Azure boards is better right now than GitHub Issues. Don't worry though, if you're using GitHub, you can easily integrate your GitHub to Azure boards in Azure. I'm sorry, in Azure DevOps. And if you only need Azure boards and you're using the rest for the GitHub, then Azure boards license. I'm sorry, the Azure DevOps licensing is if you're a stakeholder, then you're not paying anything, right? So, and stakeholder is 99% enough to use Azure boards. So, meaning that you can technically use GitHub Azure boards for free with GitHub. Having said that, again, Azure GitHub licenses can include Azure DevOps licensing usually. So it depends on what kind of licensing agreement you have. So you might as well use it because you already have it, right? So again, so if you're using GitHub and you need a better planning tool, Azure boards is great. Okay. You can also integrate with other planning tools like Jira, but I hate Jira. It drives me nuts.
I was waiting for you to say Jira sucks.
And yes, and Jira sucks. It's like a hashtag for me. It's just it makes things so difficult in my opinion, and it's just you have to pay for everything, and it just drives me nuts, right? So I find Azure Boards way better planning tool than Jira. Okay, but again, if you're using Jira, you can hook up Jira too, and if it works for you, it works for you, right? So Azure Boards is the better than GitHub Issues at the moment. Okay, let's take a look at the different vertical Azure repos. Azure repos and GitHub repos. So Azure repos, in my opinion, code review experience is much better. So when you try to do a pull request in Azure repo, it is much cleaner. It's a lot more user-friendly. It's just better, in my opinion, and easier to navigate too. Like for example, I can see all the files if I want to, right? Anyway, I can in GitHub, while it's getting better user experience, it's just, again, I like personal Azure repos. GitHub is also nice. It's just my personal opinion, Azure repos code review experience is better. And feel free to chime in and tell me I'm wrong, by the way. Azure repos branch policies are more enterprise friendly than the GitHub branch protection rules. And I'm basing it on the fact that in Azure branch policy, Azure DevOps branch policies, I can configure things like, I can say, if somebody modified this folder, it has to be approved by the following people. If somebody modified the following file types, but not the following folders, it needs to be approved by another set of people, right? You can do that in GitHub as well, but you have to work your way around this, right? There's a code owners file that you can use and a consensus app that you can use, but it's just not as smooth as branch policies, right? Dave, do you have anything else to say about the branch policies? You there? Okay. Anyway, moving on. Does anybody have any questions so far? And just to get away from the presentation, I can go ahead and connect to first. I can do this. I go ahead and switch to my GitHub, for example. Here, I can use, so in here, I can go ahead and that's a branch policy. On a
Mass here.
hear me? Hello?
Yeah, okay. I
Okay,
guess,
sorry.
yeah, that sounds like a
Is this better?
gap on the communication. I like a 10-second delay. You hear me? Yeah,
Okay.
I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry about
Can
that.
you hear me?
I don't know. I'm hardwired onto a laptop into a gigabit Ethernet router and a gigabit internet connection. But what are you gonna do? So can you see my screen? Yes? No?
Yeah, I can see your screen. Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can hear you fine. Did you
I
have a
can hear
question?
you. Okay, cool. Yeah, just saying that you just mentioned that you can, let people approve a folder. Maybe you can just use that as an example, quickly show.
So for example, this is my pull request for master. So I can and say at least one person has to approve it. I can say things like, you know what? What do I want to say? When somebody pushes a new change, go ahead and reset all my code reviews. I can link it to my work items, meaning that link to the work item is required, so you cannot commit a change without connecting it to a recorded piece of work. So it has to have a story for it that you need to connect your code to. Again, limit merge and whatnot, but the things that you were interested particularly, Eric, I can do like this. So I can say for the path, like when the YAML code got modified, right? When the YAML code got modified, Max has to approve. Okay. Any kind of that, like, I don't know, the docs folder that's modified, like another person has to approve it. Does that make sense?
So you can add multiple policy, like conditionally decide what kind of folder or what kind of file, and then go to different people.
Yes.
All right. I thought it's only one choice you got.
No, you can, again, based on the file type, I can say, so for example, Max has to approve the docs, right? And he cannot approve his own change. And then somebody else, for example, any YAML file, somebody has to, let's say, I don't know where I get those people, but I don't know, let's say Dave, do I have Dave here? Dave Lloyd has to approve it.
Okay, you saying
Again,
adding multiple policies.
Yeah, and by the way, this could be developer, right? This could be teams. Does that make sense? And again, you can use all kinds of logic in there. You can see it on the screen, right? I can build all kinds of different regex, saying approve this, but not this kind of thing. and then I can say, yeah, to approve it, and then there's in the pull request it's going to send if it covers more than one rules, then all of those people have to approve it specifically, right?
Okay.
So in GitHub, it's also there. It's just like this is not there for status checks. So excellent in GitHub. Builds also, again, they're not technically part. They are not in the branch protection rules themselves. They are more of a trigger based on the type of the based on the pull request change. And yeah, comment resolution is there. Work items are obviously there because they don't have them. Yeah, the rest is there. Okay. So branch policies are better in Azure DevOps. GitHub, having said that, GitHub repos, I find them faster. They just work faster. GitHub in general, they're very, very good when it comes to speed of their products, right? Repos are faster. I don't want to say actions are faster because I don't know if they are. But again, the rest of the GitHub, it seems to be just snappier than Azure DevOps. Okay. Again, not pick on Azure DevOps because it's also good. It's just find repos faster. GitHub repos offer the dependency scanning and secret scanning. This is that advanced security that I was talking about. Azure DevOps does not have it. You need to integrate with a third-party scanning tool like SonarQube, White Source, Checkmarks, Aqua, whatever, right? GitHub, you can also integrate with those third-party tools, but there's also built-in tools that are just work nicer and close. Again, has a lot more integrated, better integrated experience. And okay, and the GitHub repos, thanks to the GitHub Actions for each API, allows you to build flexible and highly specific workflows. So you can, because GitHub Actions are not just about the pipelines. You can actually automate and you can write the GitHub Action for almost any functionality inside GitHub. So for example, when somebody marks this issue, puts a tag on it saying staging, I'm going to go ahead and trigger my staging deployment, right? When somebody does something to a GitHub repo, I'm going to trigger something else, right? There's a lot of really, really cool stuff that you can do inside GitHub Actions. It seems GitHub Actions reach REST API. It should say reach REST API, note to myself. But again, it's just a lot more robust. GitHub repos support code spaces, which is awesome. We already talked about them. Azure DevOps does not. Even though when you go to Azure DevOps, you can actually launch the code space. It's just there's nothing there, which is unfortunate. Hopefully they're going to enable it, and it's going to be great in Azure DevOps as well. All right, so advantage Azure GitHub repos, right? After all, code management is where GitHub has its roots. It's just that's where it started. It has millions and millions of users that are using it. It must be good, and I think it's good, right? So I think GitHub repos are better than Azure repos. I wouldn't say by much, but I just find them better.
It's a tight race.
It is tight, right?
It kind of yeah. So you know what? I think your main point there, and it's the right one. I personally like the UI better in Azure repos. I think Azure repos are easier to navigate and use than GitHub repos, but GitHub repos are more powerful.
Yes. Yeah, and they're just a lot more feature rich, right, and just faster. So anyway, Azure GitHub are better. So, and by the way, you can use, if you're using Azure DevOps for everything else, for Azure pipelines, for Azure boards, for testing, for whatnot, right? You can hook up GitHub repos and just store your code in GitHub and use the rest of the Azure DevOps, right? In fact, that's one of the ways to get your to get into a GitHub, right? So if you need advanced security, if you find GitHub repos better, right, for you, then you can use GitHub repos for your code management and the rest of Azure DevOps for the rest of it, because that's what you like and that's what works for you, right? When and if GitHub, the rest of the GitHub functionality start working better for you, you can just start moving that functionality to GitHub as well. Okay. All right. So talk about GitHub Actions. And I want to talk about the Azure pipelines versus the GitHub Actions in 3 possible scenarios, right? In the CI, continuous integration, continuous deployment, and the continuous integration, continuous deployment. Because I feel it's important because it's a very, very vast topic and there's a lot of small things in it. And I wanted to differentiate different from different points, I guess. So when it comes to Azure Azure pipelines versus GitHub, Azure pipelines versus GitHub Actions in terms of CI, both are excellent when it comes to CI. Both just really, really good, right? It's just you can trigger you can trigger CI builds on the GitHub Actions on your commits, on the pull requests, or in GitHub. By the way, the recipe has a bit richer, so there's a lot more triggers that you can do. But again, both are excellent CI tools. GitHub Action, the downside of the GitHub Actions is that it doesn't support templates, right? So for example, if in an enterprise, you want to have a certain builds to be run a certain way, right? And you want to make sure that nobody can modify it, right? And so on and so forth. In Azure DevOps, Azure Pipelines, you can set up the pipeline templates, right? Which means that you can have a YAML stored somewhere else accessible to people to consume and maybe contribute, but not necessarily mess with it. And then your builds will be inheriting from a template, and you can enforce to make sure that it's actually used by the build is used by that template. Is using that template. So in GitHub Actions, it's just not there yet, right? They have this reusable actions that you can use, which is, again, it's a good start. And it's kind of reminds me of the task groups in Azure DevOps. Task groups is a functionality in Azure Pipelines that allows you to, when you have certain actions that you keep reusing, you can group them together and then just use that group and insert it instead of adding every single task. So again, GitHub Actions doesn't support templates, which for many companies is a deal breaker because they have to be they need to be in control of how things are built, right? Having said that, GitHub obviously, while it doesn't control it the same way Azure DevOps controls it, it has its own mechanisms that you can use to control and reach the same controls that you need. It's just you have to build them, okay? Based on the REST API and build like a GitHub app that will do it for you. In GitHub Actions, there is no UI editor. In Azure Pipelines, you can do pipelines using classic pipelines using the UI, or you can use YAML, right? Obviously, YAML is better and a lot more powerful, and that's a new way to go, but GitHub Actions only have YAML. Okay, whether that's a bad thing or a good thing, just wanted to highlight that that's the case. You can, again, they have this task assistant, same way they have in Azure DevOps, where you can select which task, customize the properties, and insert them to YAML. Both of them have it, GitHub and Azure DevOps. Because they both have it, I'm not highlighting that difference. Okay, so advantage here, it's a tie. I think, and again, because they were both great, they both work beautifully. Azure Pipelines more mature, right? It's been around longer, so it has, it has its advantages, but the GitHub is more flexible and it works as well, very well. Both are excellent CI tools. Azure Pipelines, like I said, more mature. I said it already. All right, so any comments on that? Any thoughts? All right, moving on. So from the CD standpoint, from the deployment standpoint, for when you compare Azure Pipelines and GitHub Actions, Azure Pipelines provide the mature features that I wish GitHub Actions had. For example, again, like I've been talking about it, the templates, right? You can control how your things are deployed. You can build templates, you can nest templates, and you can basically come up with a very, very sophisticated release management and deployment workflows that are you in full control, right? And if you need to change it for everybody, then you would just change it in one place versus multiple places, okay? So GitHub Actions also, I'm sorry, the Azure Pipelines has service connections. Service connections is what allows you to connect to a third party, authenticate to a third party things like Azure, I don't know, ServiceNow, whatever, right? And use that connectivity connection in your pipeline without actually using username and the password in the pipeline. It has stages, it has gates, it has deployment groups, variable groups, secure files, and so on. Again, Azure Pipelines from the continuous integration of continuous delivery, continuous deployment, sorry, it just has a lot more bells and whistles. Both have environments, but Azure Pipelines environments are just more mature. There's a lot more functionality. It has gates. It has various checks that you can do that are currently, again, you can write them in GitHub yourself, but they're just not available. They're not as they're not as crisp as not as ready to go as the ones in Azure Pipelines. And there's also no native way to download the artifacts from other workloads. What I mean by this is in Azure Pipeline, I can create a build. I can save that build artifact. I can build my code, package it, save it as an artifact, and then download it in the next pipeline, right? Very easy to do. And again, right? In the GitHub, that's not so easy. So you kind of can work around this, but it's very convoluted. So basically, for every GitHub Actions, I have to compile my code again, right? Or I can use a release, but again, we'll get to that. So I just find it's missing. I wish it had it. GitHub Actions.
Sorry, Max.
Yes, please.
You know what? I just want to also hear your opinion about that, and also my comments as well. Even for Azure Pipeline, I feel like the artifacts, it's also quite limited. They have artifacts kind of a function for, you can use it as a feed, right? But that's only for build. And I wish they have a a function like actually like artifact. Like you can actually, manage your outputs so you can do better release control of your, build output and say approve or whatever, or like a checking itself. I've been expecting, hoping they would add this power for many years. I still haven't seen any. Do you have any information on that?
So first of all, I'd like to highlight again, thank you, Eric. What I would like to highlight is when I say artifact here, I don't mean the artifact in the feed. I mean the artifact of the build itself, right?
Yeah, I got you. I'm just saying that actual release package.
Yeah, I will actually get to the fact where we're comparing GitHub GitHub packages versus Azure artifacts. Okay, but the one thing I want to say is Azure artifacts, they were never meant to compete with, I don't think they were ever meant to compete with Artifactory or Nexus, right? Because they're not.
Even some function on that, right? It would be very helpful. I feel like when you release something, you lack of the visibility into what actually you release, the package in the layout, in the history, like the actual package list.
Okay, no. There are ways to deal with that in GitHub, in Azure Pipelines or GitHub, right? You can create release notes and all kinds of crazy stuff. Link on the work item. So there's definitely a way to deal with that, to basically tell you what's in that package. And one of the best features of Azure DevOps is the fact that I can go to the package in the feed, click on the build it, and find out what's in that package, which code, which commits, which features, what epics were closed, and so on and so forth, where that package is deployed, which environment that's deployed in, right? So I can track all of that inside Azure DevOps. That's one of the beauty of Azure DevOps because it's all very, very tightly integrated. But again, it just depends. I guess to answer your question, Eric, again, we can take it offline. I don't know exactly what your use case is, but depending on your use case, you can make it work.
Yeah, no, that's not a complex topic. I'm just saying that I wish they have some kind of like Artifactory power in there. That's why we cannot get rid of Artifactory.
Yeah. Well, again, the reason why Artifactory exists, right? So GitHub Actions is rapidly evolving and now offers features I wish we had in Azure pipelines, like the secure deployments of OpenConnect. So meaning that I can just I can say that this GitHub is allowed to connect to is allowed to deploy to these Azure resources, right? So there's no passwords. Azure DevOps, I'm sure it's going to come up with something using managed identity and whatnot, but that's what the way that's the GitHub. There's a new feature called deployments with OpenID Connect. If you're interested, take a look. It's actually pretty cool. All right, so advantage Azure pipelines. It's just more mature and robust tool, right? When it comes to continuous deployment, it's just better. Okay, so at some point, Azure pipeline, GitHub Actions will catch up, I'm sure, because of the pace they are developing new features. It is, however, again, it's not there yet, and I'm sure it's going to be there soon. But the one thing that I would like to say for the people that are looking at Azure DevOps versus GitHub is, in my opinion, GitHub will never function the same way GitHub does. I'm sorry, no. GitHub will never function the same way Azure DevOps does, right? So if you're used to certain practices of working on things, then it's the new tool when you migrate to the new tool, there's going to be some adjustments to your process, right? And that's not necessarily a bad thing because your processes should be reviewed once in a while, right? Just because that's how we've been doing things for years doesn't mean that you should keep doing it, right? The same way. It's just there might be better ways, right? And same thing for the GitHub Actions, right? Just GitHub Actions and Azure pipelines, while they're very similar behind the scenes, they just work differently. All right, moving on. So Azure Pipeline CI/CD. So when it comes to the build and deploy at the same time, with Azure Pipelines, you have separate stages, build and deploy. With GitHub, you only have one where you build and deploy at the same time. So in Azure Pipelines, I can build now, store it in my as a artifact, as a package, as an artifact anywhere, and including the Azure Pipelines itself, and then deploy and let people pick which artifact they deploy, right? So for example, if somebody wants to deploy a version from 2 months ago or previous version, they can. In GitHub, it becomes a little bit trickier because I have to build a different version of the Git, right, of the code. There's been a lot of
a question here. Suppose if it is not having the features of like getting the older version, how about the rollback and stuff for GitHub Action? When I deploy a version, I find some bug in them, so I wanted to roll back to a previous version. How it works in GitHub Action?
Well, there's multiple ways you can make it work, right? The most simplest one is just you have a tag in your Git that you can just deploy that tag. You can also you can create a release from it, but whatever. You can also say I want to create a new branch from my previous version and deploy that branch.
Okay. Does it have the capability to integrate with artifactories like Nexus? So even if I wanted to roll back, I can pull that version from Nexus. Does it have that integration feature?
You can. There's definitely tasks in there to download the tasks from the task from Artifactory. How nicely it is from the user standpoint, I'm not sure.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
All right, so The one thing I forgot to mention, by the way, about the Azure pipelines is that you can easily integrate your Azure pipelines to deploy the code that was built in Jenkins, right? Or another TFS or something else, right? GitHub, you basically, like you're only deploying things from GitHub kind of thing, right? So it's worth noting that GitHub Actions are not just about CI/CD. The GitHub Actions, it could be about anything inside GitHub, right? So you can automate the GitHub Issues functionality. You can automate the anything else that you do in GitHub, right? So as soon as you can write in actions for pretty much any click that you do in GitHub. Having said that, when it comes to CI/CD, overall, Azure Pipelines is still better, just more mature and more robust tool. Like I said before, you can easily integrate GitHub with Azure Pipelines. So you can do everything in GitHub, but use Azure Pipelines for building and deploying. So, again, the beauty of it is just it's so easily integrated, right? Until you're comfortable with GitHub Actions, so you can move. You can keep until you're comfortable with GitHub Actions, until your team is comfortable with GitHub Actions, until it's built enough muscle memory for the GitHub Actions, or until GitHub Actions is doing what you want it to do, right? What you needed to do, what your requirements are saying that needs to be happening. You can easily integrate with Azure Pipelines. All right, GitHub Azure Artifacts versus GitHub Packages. So those are the both packages allow you to offer artifact storage that will allow you to, again, they start for free. You will pay some small fee depending on your consumption. Okay. Again, very comparable from that standpoint. The one thing that I want to highlight is GitHub packages support containers. Docker, OSI, and this OCI images, so you can store containers. So the GitHub, inside GitHub packages, you can store Ruby. There's a little, I think there's, you can store Ruby gems as well. And maybe there's, yeah, that's about it, right? That's the main difference between the GitHub packages from what you can store. Azure Artifacts can store universal packages, which basically anything you want it to be, because it's essentially a zip file. I honestly never found it that useful, that part of the Azure DevOps. But some people might have. So Azure Artifacts support upstream sources. So in Azure Artifacts, you can say, I want to download the packages from Maven. I want to cache the packages from Maven Central. So if Maven Central, so when the first time you try to get the package, it's gonna look at the local feed. If it's there, it's gonna get it from a local feed. If it's not there, it's gonna go to Maven Central and get it and cache it locally. So the next time it's getting it from Azure Artifacts. So if Maven goes down, you're not affected. Comes at a cost because, again, the more packages you cache, the more your storage for the artifacts. But again, it's usually not that expensive, so might not be a big deal. It also, again, because it caches things, there's a lot more packages in your feed, so navigation sometimes becomes problematic, but I never found it problematic because there's a filtering tool is excellent. All right. Azure Artifacts supports universal packages. I talked about that. Azure Artifacts offer granular permissions control. So in Azure Artifacts, I can, again, I can give an access to a specific feed. I can have multiple feeds, right? I can decide who has permissions to what. In GitHub, it's on, you either have access or you don't. Azure Artifacts right now at least have better auditing for the artifacts, and it allows you anonymous access if you want to. GitHub does not. Any questions? I still find, though, because GitHub packages support containers, I still find GitHub packages better from the product standpoint, right? Just because nowadays I work with containers a lot. Okay.
Sorry, Max.
Yeah.
By that GitHub package support container, do you means that it can be, working as like a container registry, and you can directly pull image from that?
Yeah.
All right.
So it's right
That's
there,
cool.
right? It's very nice.
Yeah.
Again, you can always use other container registries if you're not using GitHub packages, but having that functionality right there built in, it's very nice, very handy. I really want them to have Helm support, so that to wrap up the story about the containers, so you can store Helm packages together with the images in one place, and hopefully that's going to come soon.
Yeah, you're becoming like a greedy, yeah?
Yeah, we all do. It's not greedy, it's the customers, right? We need it. So we want to use that tool. So we wish they had the things that we need. But yes, greedy is the word. Okay, so API integrations extensibility. Both offer rich and well-documented REST API, but the GitHub is just more flexible and better documented. I don't know, Dave, what do you think? You had a lot of exposure recently.
Yeah, the API well, you know what? Azure CLI for Azure DevOps was really good. I haven't used GitHub API, or sorry, the GitHub CLI.
Oh, it's beautiful.
You use it a lot.
Yeah.
But the REST API in GitHub is super easy to use, much easier than the Azure DevOps API.
Yeah.
I mean, it's good. The Azure DevOps API is great. It's very, you can do tons with it. It's fantastic. I just find it more difficult to understand.
And there's less in it, right? When you compare from the functionality standpoint.
Yeah, there's the GitHub API is a first-class citizen for sure.
It's insane, yeah.
Out of curiosity, like
Yeah.
how mostly like a user or customers want the API? What they mostly use this API build for what kind of usage?
For scripting stuff.
Yeah. So it allows you to extend your pipeline. Sorry, go ahead, Dave.
Yeah, I was just going to say, so I'm right now working with a customer to migrate from Azure DevOps to GitHub, and everything I'm doing is all through scripts to automate it, and I'm using the API loads for that.
But to give, thank you, Dave. To give more kind of an end user scenario is with API, I can build my own reports, right? I want to show me all the builds that have failed on the scanning step in the last 24 hours. With API, I can do it. I can also write my own report, and I can go, and there's some built-in functionality in Azure DevOps, by the way, which called analytics, which is beautiful, which I has mentioned. But again, with REST API calls, I can just get all that information, all of those reports, readily available to me. And again, I can use GraphQL as well in GitHub. And again, it just allows me to have more, access to the reports that I need. It also allows me to manipulate the Azure DevOps or the GitHub. Like,
do you have a lot of
the
like
UI.
actual business case like a need from the users from your experience, because like in ours, we rarely mostly the GUI or those functions that kind of more than enough in general.
So for example, right? So here's I want to do a pull request. I want to have a build run during the pull request. Okay. And if, for example, if I mark my pull request as don't run the test, right? I put a tag on it saying no tests, for example, right? Then I can build my pipeline using REST API in such a way that it's going to read that tag, and it's going to automatically, without modifying the pipeline, dynamically during the runtime, it's going to make sure that the tests, if are not run, or the tests are not failing the build because the pipeline, because the test failing. Right, so I can like all that dynamic behavior that I want to introduce in the pipeline, I can do using REST API.
Yeah, I know you have tons of functions you can add that, but just wonder, do you have a lot of actual needs seen from the customers, from your experience,
all the
like
time.
with many companies they ask
all
for?
The time. Like Dave said, like the things that like you can, or some of the things you cannot do in UI that you can do for the REST API only. Some of the things are just easier to do through the REST API because you otherwise you have to do thousands of clicks, right? It's just easier to do the REST API call and just get it done.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, thanks.
So it's like, again, repeating and automating some of the things that you do on a regular basis. GitHub has a GitHub Apps. I am still trying to, I'm not an expert in GitHub Apps, right? But it allows you to wrap the functionality, or like write an application that will extend your GitHub Apps functionality, right? So for example, to enhance your GitHub functionality, for example, you can write a GitHub app, custom GitHub app, that's gonna allow you to like inject certain things into your build on the fly. So there's a lot of flexibility, there's a lot of functionality that if you go to and Google GitHub Apps, you're going to see a very large and rich marketplace for it. There's a lot of already things in it. You can build your own. That's a very, very cool system. Another example will be like a chat ops, right? So you can create basically use a chat ops to drive your development flow. So for example, you can put in the chat things like, I don't know, deploy to staging. It's going to go ahead and deploy to staging. It's going to go ahead and check that, make sure that you can deploy to staging, that the code has passed and blah, blah, blah. And it's going to deploy to staging. But again, I'm just this hypothetical scenario that you can do using GitHub Apps. And that's all because the REST API is very, very rich. Both have a myriad of integrations. You can integrate Azure DevOps with practically anything. So same can be said about GitHub. So they're both great.
It is true though. The average user isn't using the API a lot.
No.
It has tons of uses. We use it all the time. But I mean, your average tester, project manager, BA, stakeholder, they're using the UI, they're using the tool.
They're not offering anything using REST API, right? So not creating anything REST API, right? They're still taking advantage of the features that are basically driven by the REST API, right? Because at the end of the day, entire Azure DevOps and entire GitHub is driven by the REST API behind the scenes, right? And like, I don't know, you look at the report that somebody created for you and it's doing a bunch of OData queries or the REST API calls. You're using it, it's custom, you just haven't created it, right, yourself. It just allows you to extend what you need from extend the functionality of the tool to what you need. But yeah, that's a good point, Dave. And Eric. So Azure DevOps has Microsoft Office integration. In Azure DevOps, I can connect my work items to Excel, change them in Excel, and push all of those changes into Azure DevOps, Azure Boards. I can do the same thing with the Microsoft project. I cannot do that with my GitHub issues. Again, to my surprise, right? It's just a lot of people are using Microsoft Office integration. A lot of people are, again, for doing bulk updates or doing all kinds of initial planning, they just prefer to do it in Excel. So it's in the enterprise world, I think it's a big deal. So advantage, GitHub, both are good, but GitHub is just better. It's more extensible and the API is better. But Azure DevOps,
easier to use.
Easier to use too, yeah. All right, thank you very much. So licensing, the fun part. I'm gonna go a little bit faster. So Azure licensing, so Azure DevOps is free for up to 5 basic users and unlimited for numbers of stakeholders. So stakeholders are the people that can be using Azure boards, can be using dashboards, can be kicking off and viewing the pipelines. They cannot be offering the pipelines. They cannot be making code changes, but it's free and it's unlimited. So you can have as many of them as you want. And 5 basic users. So basic users can do anything in Azure DevOps except for test management, because test management is a different license. So after 5 basic users, 3 basic users, you get to have, you can buy additional user license for $6 per user per month. Another thing I would like to mention here is if you have an active Visual Studio subscription, then you already have a basic license. Okay, the chances are if you have an enterprise subscription, I'm sorry, if you have a Visual Studio enterprise subscription, then you have you have the test plans and you have the basic, you have all the things that you can possibly get in Azure DevOps, right? Basic license is free. Like I said before, Visual Studio subscription should say is included, not free. Okay, GitHub pricing has layers. So free for basics. So you can start with GitHub for free, absolutely, with some functionality, with some, again, you can take a look at the table if you want, with some basic functionality. After that, it's a $4 per user per month for a team edition, which gives you access to more features, and it's $21 per user per month. The prices that I'm listing, those are the online prices, right? The prices that I got off the website. If you, I'm sure if you have an enterprise agreement, the deals are going to be better for Azure DevOps and for GitHub, right? But I don't know them, so I'm listing the prices that I know. And GitHub Advanced Security and Code Spaces are extra. Code Spaces, I believe, is based on the consumption. Advanced Security, it's just a different, it just adds more to your already enterprise edition. So at the end of the day, GitHub has, again, some advanced functionality that Azure DevOps doesn't. And if you need it, then you're going to have to pay a little extra. Yeah. So GitHub Actions, packages, Azure pipelines and artifacts might incur additional costs depending on the usage, right? So if you store more, if you need more storage in the artifacts, and you pay a little bit more based on how much storage you're using. If you need more concurrent plans in the pipelines, then you pay a little bit more, right? Or if you need to have more dedicated hosted agents, right? Then you pay a little bit more. GitHub Enterprise license includes the Azure DevOps Basic license. So if you have paid for GitHub, you have Azure DevOps Basic. As far as I know, right now, that's the case. Things change all the time. Okay. All right. So meaning that if you're using GitHub and you want to take advantage of Azure DevOps, you can, because you already have a license for it. Again, I don't know how many users you have. Yeah. Yeah, Eric.
Apologize if I've taken too much of your
time. No.
Okay. So, you know what? I feel like, Azure DevOps is far more advanced, features than GitHub itself. And I'm surprised to see, GitHub is actually not cheap at all, comparative, right? And I'm quite curious if Dave can share why people want to move away from Azure DevOps, in this case, to GitHub. I wonder, sometimes I see this price, I wonder, is just because GitHub has, more user base, so they can easier to sell than Azure DevOps, or what's the reason there?
So the features in GitHub that are not available anywhere else, right? Like I said before, advanced security is awesome. It is very, very good. It is worth the move.
But you pay extra, right?
Yeah, of course you pay extra, but otherwise it's not available to you, right?
But again, if you Max, talk a little bit about like how you can, you could have, so in Azure DevOps, you might want to scan on your build.
Yeah.
You might want to do white source scanning, check marks, lint, there's SonarQube, sure. There's all kinds of, and GitHub can do a lot of that stuff a lot cheaper, save you a lot of money.
Yeah, it's a good point, right? So all of those scans, they cost you extra, right? And sometimes they're very, very expensive. Like you'll be surprised, Eric, how much money you can spend on this stuff, right? And you pay that on
a
top
large
of Azure DevOps.
organization.
Yeah.
So Dave, is that one of the reasons your clients move away?
Yeah, that's probably a big one. It's also, you know what, GitHub is very developer centered, right? It is there first and foremost for the developer. Azure DevOps, you know, not that Azure DevOps isn't, but Azure DevOps is a little bit more of an enterprise tool because the boards are really good. Azure pipelines are excellent, and you know, I've got a built-in NuGet server if I want NuGet feed or Maven feed or NPM feed if I want one, that I can create an upstream feed behind that to pull. So, you know, just from an enterprise point of view, makes life a little bit easier. But GitHub just does things for the developer that Azure DevOps may never do. And so a lot of things like code spaces God, there's tons of things.
Yeah.
Max probably did better at listing them off, but so a lot of companies are just listening to their developers who are saying, we want to go to GitHub. We want to take advantage of all those tools that we have on there. And a lot of, you know, when so I mentioned before, I'm currently migrating a customer. The only thing I'm migrating is repos. That customer actually is using Jira for work management.
Yep.
And they're using Azure pipelines for their CI/CD. And lots of other customers who are using Azure boards and Azure pipelines, but they're moving to GitHub for repos just because the developers are saying, we want to take advantage of the stuff that's going on in GitHub.
Yeah,
Well, it probably makes sense that in that case they can save money because developer doesn't even need to use the board like Azure board a lot or build pipeline there, so they can use the free license maybe in the GitHub.
It's but Eric, there's one thing that's very, very important to understand, right? You need to keep your developers happy.
Yeah.
Because otherwise they will leave, and all the domain knowledge with them will go, and it's just all of that. Just keeping the developers happy and productive is it's a lot more important than okay, you know what, I'll spend a little bit more, right? Because at the end of the day, you're gonna end up paying twice because people left, right? And think of it this way, right? Again, I'm not picking Azure DevOps, right? But I'm also just went to the point of you want to keep the developers happy. You want your developers to come work for you, and again, and stay working for you, right? And if you're using an outdated tool, and I'm not saying Azure DevOps is outdated, right? I'm just saying from the point of keeping developers happy, right? Then people not gonna come.
I'm just trying to figure like why you know they're happier with the GitHub. I guess it's because they are more familiar.
Exactly.
You know, they maybe from very beginning, so they think there is less like a hierarchy or like a process tied, so they can do things faster, easier, and more direct.
No,
maybe.
it's just they're more comfortable with it, right? They like it better. It's more popular. It's just they're more, again, that's all there is to it, right? It's just, and if they're happier with it and you can make it work, then why not, right? And the things like that Dave mentioned, the code spaces, the advanced security, and again, with advanced security, it might become like Dave said, at the end of the day, it might end up being cheaper than the rest of your scanners, right? Depending on what you're doing. But the user experience in the advanced security is so much nicer than going through like, okay, I found this bug and the pipeline run and the scan failed and I need to go to this new URL to go to this freaking ugly UI and try to find what exactly is wrong and then just navigate 50 different things. I have to know another tool just to know what I need to fix. It is very frustrating. When in advanced security, it's just, it tells you right there. And you can actually deal with it right there. And it can deal it for you, right? So it's just, again, that developer workflow it allows developers to be more productive and allows developers to focus on actually developing new features versus being annoyed by inconveniences of learning another tool. So
Great points. Yeah.
again, and also keep in mind too, right? The amount of innovation that's going on in GitHub right now, it is amazing, right? So it's again, it's definitely the future, right? That again, it's just there's so much new stuff that we're coming out. The stuff in Azure DevOps comes up as well, but it's just not at the same pace, right? So there's a lot of reasons to start looking at GitHub.
Yeah.
So
I guess I just more from like an enterprise world, and then so
no, exactly.
And a little bias, on the enterprise world of the Azure DevOps, but
yeah.
GitHub is really, kind of great for many smaller, medium business, smaller team, and user friendly, and people are used to it.
I can see why you would say that, Eric, and I to some extent I might agree with you, but I again, you can definitely make GitHub work in a large enterprise. You can absolutely make it work, right? And again, and developers are going to be happy, and you're going to hit every point that you need to hit, and it just requires to change how you work, right? To change your practices, to change your processes, to adapt towards this new tool. And sometimes it's not necessarily a bad thing, right? So again, I wouldn't say that the GitHub is only for small and open source. It's not. GitHub can absolutely be successful, and I've seen it in the large enterprises. It is, however, requires adjusting your how you do things. Okay. All right. So, but advantage here on the licensing goes to Azure DevOps because, well, you can't argue with the numbers. It's just cheaper, right? Unless you start counting things like, oh, and you also need to pay for the white source and check marks and blah, blah, right? Then maybe it's going to come down to being less. But just for the generic usage, Azure DevOps definitely cheaper. Okay. So honorable mention that we're wrapping up, almost wrapping up. Thank you for staying. Hanging back. So the one thing I wanted to mention is, again, authentication and authorizations, I already talked about it. Again, so I'm going to skip that. Both tools have CLI, right? So Azure DevOps has Azure DevOps CLI, which is great that you can take advantage of. And GitHub CLI also great, and it also works. And again, they're both great. You can basically do all of your things that you're doing in the web browser. You can do all of that inside the command line and never open up a browser. Okay. The advanced security is great. I mentioned this again and again because it's just great. Right? Azure DevOps doesn't have anything like this. I wish they had it. Code Spaces is great, right? Just not available in Azure DevOps. I wish they had it. The wiki that's available in Azure DevOps and the GitHub wiki. I find they both have wikis. I find Azure DevOps wiki a little bit better. It wasn't important enough to me to put it on a separate slide, but I wanted to mention it. We talked about the dashboards and widgets already, test plans. We did talk about mobile support. We talked about GitHub pages. So Azure DevOps doesn't have GitHub pages. The GitHub does, and GitHub pages is a way to build a static website. So if you have a static website to tell you about this project or some static website for something else, you can use GitHub for it. Which Azure DevOps does not, but again, I don't use GitHub pages, so I don't care. What do I choose? Okay, what would I choose right now for myself if I had the choice, right? So if I'm starting from scratch, I would go with GitHub. I would go all in on GitHub. I would modify my processes. I would make it work, right? Because you can make it work and you should make it work, right? If you're starting fresh. There's a lot of successful companies that are using it. If I need more advanced planning tool, then I would integrate with GitHub Azure Boards. If for some reason, if I cannot use GitHub issues and cannot use GitHub issues beta, which as it evolves really rapidly, I find myself more difficult to say that I actually cannot make it work in our GitHub issues. But if my business people require more, they used to more enterprise planning tool, then Azure Boards is the way to go right now. So I can still integrate with Azure Boards, my GitHub, and make it work in the GitHub. So everybody else is going to be in GitHub. My planning will be in Azure Boards. Okay.
GitHub Issues is shipped for the enterprise.
GitHub Issues Classic, yes. GitHub Issues Beta is freaking awesome.
It's still not Azure Boards. Still not good enough.
No, it's not. But it will get there really fast, Dave. It's already almost there.
So.
The one thing that I'm missing, the one thing that I think they're missing is like the templates, right? So you can just for everybody else. So GitHub Issues allows you to configure your processes and your workflows and all of your boards and your backlogs right there on the screen, right? So you're basically starting from like an empty Excel spreadsheet kind of thing, right? So you have to do everything from scratch. What I wish they had, and I'm sure they will introduce that soon. Like, okay, so you can start from scratch, or you can start from this template that usually teams are using when they're using Scrum, and it will go ahead and pre-create all the stuff for you, right? That'll be it. That's all they need.
Well, you tell a PMO that.
And which is why I added this comment saying if you still need it, then you can integrate it with GitHub with Azure Boards or Jira.
It very much depends on the type of work planning you need to do.
Yes.
If you need old school project planning, it ain't going to do it for most large. That's what I said. For enterprises, it's not quite there. Hopefully they get there. I don't think it's as close as you might think it is, but
I think they're really close. I think they're really close. I think it's going to get there soon. Well, by soon, and I don't mean tomorrow, right? I mean like within the next few months, right? It's good. It is already great. It's going to be better. It is. I think it's very soon. It can go toe to toe with Azure Boards. I mean, there's still going to be personal preference that people just prefer this over this, but it doesn't mean you cannot make it work. Right, and I'm trying to keep personal preferences again away from the conversation, right? So, but yeah, point taken. So if you need a more mature release pipelines and for some reason Azure Actions that doesn't work for you, there's some things that you need from Azure Actions, from GitHub Actions. You can integrate the Azure pipelines, and you can store your code and maybe your issues inside the GitHub and your planning inside the GitHub and use Azure pipelines to build and deploy. So again, if I start from scratch, I would go start with GitHub. If I need boards, if I need more planning, I'll integrate GitHub with boards, but not the other way around. I would, if I need more advanced pipeline, I would integrate pipelines into GitHub. If I'm already heavily invested in Azure DevOps, right? If I'm already there, then and you need features unique to GitHub, I would start by moving my code to GitHub repos, because it's a good starting point. It keeps the developers happy. It keeps me happy because I still can make sure that all the proper gates and checks and again all of the things that needs to happen to keep the things safe can happen, and developers are happy. So it's a win-win. And then if I need to do more, if I need as the GitHub evolves, I can start adopting more GitHub features slowly, right? If, however, I'm heavily invested in Azure DevOps and do not need any current unique features, do not need any features that are unique to GitHub, I would stay put. Just stay in Azure DevOps. Okay, there's no reason for it. If you don't have a reason to move to GitHub, don't move to GitHub. Continuously evaluate that, right? Because the things are changing all the time. But until you need it, stay there. And if you do decide to go to Azure DevOps, from Azure DevOps to GitHub, here's the usually the journey that people again go through. They stay in Azure DevOps until they need some functionality. Once they need some functionality, they move to GitHub repos, keeping the rest in Azure DevOps. When CI/CD story improves in GitHub Actions, they go ahead and move their GitHub Azure pipelines into GitHub. By the way, there is a great tool to move your which again is right now in beta, in private beta, I think, that allows you to move your GitHub repos to Azure repos. I'm sorry, to move your Azure repos to GitHub repos. Okay, it moves a lot of things with it along. There's also a separate migration tool that's been worked on, as far as I know, right? That allows you to maybe not 100%, but allows you to migrate from Azure pipelines to GitHub Actions. Okay. And once, again, when the planning tool improves, I kind of want to flip 3 and 4 now because I think planning tool will get faster than GitHub Actions. Start adopting GitHub issues. So start with repos, then go with the issues, go with the planning, and then go with the pipelines. That would be more migration. At the end of the day, though, like again, I started the presentation of saying Azure DevOps versus GitHub, right? And versus meaning that it's against it, right? It's fighting it. And I don't think that's the case. It doesn't. You don't have to pick one or another. You don't have to. Again, I'm going to say in Azure DevOps, I'm not going to touch GitHub. Or I'm going to be in GitHub. I will never do Azure DevOps, right? At the end of the day, you should use the right tool for the right job. Okay. So if you like Azure Boards more, you use Azure Boards. Integrate it with GitHub and use it, right? If you like repos more, integrate GitHub repos with Azure DevOps. So at the end of the day, it's not Azure DevOps versus GitHub. It could be for you Azure DevOps plus GitHub. Okay, the right tool for the right job. Any questions? Silence. Anybody has any questions? Did I miss any questions in the chat? Please.
I'm still new to Azure DevOps.
Mm-hmm.
I took a class and the instructor said that one repo to one project. I don't think it's right. I think it's more finding repos is just not so intuitive. I mean,
Are you talking about TFVC or Git?
Using Git repos in Azure DevOps.
Okay.
In the class, the instructor mentioned one project to one repo, and that doesn't seem right. I come from Atlassian background.
Yeah, I think what, again, both absolutely agree, doesn't seem right. Unless what he meant was one application, like application, serve one application project to a repo, right? So when you develop an application, you store all the code in one Git repo.
Yeah, that's about the norm for Git.
Yeah, even then, it's
I would call it.
Go ahead.
I would say one solution instead of one project, but I mean it depends on the terminology you're using. So,
but so yeah, so one solution to store one solution inside one Git repo, right? When it comes to my Azure DevOps team projects, it definitely can store more than one repo. It can store more than one type of repo. So you can have a TFVC, classic source control system, just a centralized source control system, and you can, at the same project, you have your GitHub repos, and they can coexist. And
yeah, that's good.
Yeah. In fact, when it comes to Azure DevOps, the one thing I would say it's one organization is for one company is better because it allows you to integrate and report on things across multiple teams, right? if you have multiple organizations, the reporting between the teams becomes problematic. But definitely not the project, right? And if you remember that hierarchy, there was an organization and there was a project inside it, right? So yeah, I don't know if it makes sense, but okay. Does it answer your question, Chris? I think it was Chris.
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? All right, I have one question for you. And again, please feel free to say, be as brutal as you feel like. What would you like to see different in this presentation? And the reason why I'm asking is because I will be recording this session from Microsoft for one of the conferences, and I wanted to get better and definitely need to make it shorter. So I'll have to drop a few things, but what would you like to change? What would you like to see in this presentation different? Anybody?
Matt, if you don't mind.
Yes, please.
I would say that, I don't know, I just feel like, I guess a few places when you compare the two tools, you draw the conclusion and saying which is better, or you have a tie there.
Mm-hmm.
I would say that would be a little bit kind of you know, maybe it's not that easy to just say who is better there, because it's a little bit controversial. Like you know, one tool have much more functionality, but another tool have one function that's, you know, very nice. Doesn't mean they one is better or the other is better, or even a tie. So I feel that part could have a lot of, you know, different people have different, you know, I don't know, you can spin it to be something more, you know, I don't know, lot of conclusion as simple like that.
Okay. All right. Thank you for this feedback, Eric. I thought I did it by using the word advantage versus the winner, and maybe I should say advantage currently goes to.
Maybe you can put some star. I see some article used to just put like, okay, this got like a 4-star, like 4.5, and that makes it a little bit more kind of.
Yeah, I like that. That's very good. Yeah, do a star rating system. I like that.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Matt is saying add the usage demo on screenshot. I would love to do that. I would love to do that. It's just too much to cover though. I did have slides again. They both, like you've seen, the sessions open just in case if somebody asks any questions, so I can dig in. But overall, it's very hard to with such a small time frame, right? But yeah, thank you. It's a good feedback. Anybody else? Thank you. And by the way, again, I appreciate.
This is a comment.
Yes.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
No, you go ahead.
Thank you, Max. No, it's an opinion about the two worlds. Is Azure DevOps, GitHub Enterprise in enterprises. Okay. In my particular experience, I noticed that some enterprises are approaching more to collaborate with vendors and the open source community. Mm-hmm. And that means more GitHub and knowledge required from developers or collaborators. I saw that in the projects that I manage, and people feel more comfortable using GitHub for mm-hmm. now. If you start from scratch, definitely more developers have more familiarity
absolutely
with GitHub. Yes, even just graduated people from colleges. I recruited some of them. They are more familiar with GitHub. It's because of the open source collaboration community, etc.
Exactly.
But I cannot say there is a winner. Each use case have a different how they want to organize them. Yes. Microsoft is offering a lot of incentives to onboard to Azure DevOps, for sure. It's a matter of if the team members are comfortable with which technologies or tools, the final approach to the solution. But definitely both have excellent solutions.
Yeah,
it's my personal opinion.
Okay, thank you, Alberto. Again, pointing out the fact that a lot more new developers, let's just say, are familiar with GitHub. So, and it's an advantage. So that's a good, excellent point. Thank you very much. Anybody else? All right. In that case, thank you very much for attending the session. The next session will be in the second Thursday of February, and we will soon announce what it's going to be. Oh, but one thing I forgot to notice: there is a AI bootcamp tomorrow, global AI bootcamp tomorrow, and day after tomorrow, especially Saturday. So it's on the meetup page. Go ahead and register. It's free. It's actually really good. Take a look if you like it. Okay. And like I said before, it's free and it's here local. It's run in every country by a local team. So take a look. We will have another session second Thursday of the month. We will let you know what that is. If you have any suggestions or ideas or suggestions, let us know. Again, thank you very much. Have a good evening.